Hello everyone. The United States Congress is now pursuing investigations to probe William Ruto's administration, to determine the circumstances surrounding the deadly protests that were fueled by extrajudicial killings and several abductions of protesters who went onto the streets calling for justice. Alongside these investigations, USA will also be probing the controversial relationship links existing between Kenya and the Rapid Support Forces that is based in Sudan. Initially, Kenya secured a non-NATO status during President Ruto's state visit to the US in May 2024, whereby the designation of Kenya being a member state of non-NATO was granted on June 24, 2024, whereby the status actually cemented Kenya as a key US partner in Africa and deepened bilateral ties in defense, security and economic areas. However, a series of recent developments in Nairobi have triggered concerns in Washington, with US legislators now calling for a formal reassessment of this partnership. The Senator of Idaho State of US, Honorable Jimmy Risk, who is a senior member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, has now proposed amendments to the National Defense Authorization Act for the financial year 2026. The proposal will compel the US government to investigate Ruto's administration as a matter of key interest. The senator wants the US Congress to examine whether Kenya has actually used American security assistance and intelligence in ways that undermine US interests, including the repression of civilians. The proposed amendment seeks an assessment for the use of US security assistance and intelligence support by the government of Kenya to potentially impact on state and non-state sponsored actions against civilians, including abductions, torture, renditions and violence against civilians in Kenya. The issues of concern are alleged to the human rights violations committed during anti-government protests in 2024 and June 2025, whereby, according to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, over 128 people were killed, with more than 1,400 arrested, and nearly 100 persons abducted held in Communicando, and some are still missing. The assessment also proposes to investigate Kenya's role in the abduction of 7 Turkey nationals that happened earlier in October 2024, whereby the 7 individuals were seized by Turkish intelligence through a forced abduction in Nairobi, after criticizing President Recep Erdogan. 4 of the Turkey nationals had refugee status in Kenya, and were awaiting asylum in third countries. Later on, they were deported back to Turkey, where they are now facing criminal charges under the court of law based in Turkey. President William Ruto will also be investigated regarding his engagement with the commander of Sudan's RSF forces, Matiang'i, who visited Nairobi in February 2024 last year. During a press conference chaired by William Ruto, Matiang'i announced his plans to establishing a parallel government in South Sudan, on a meeting that was hosted under the peace framework of IGAD, at KICC, Nairobi. However, the Sudan's transitional government, led by General Abdel Fattah, accused Kenya for siding with the RSF forces, prompting 2 diplomatic recalls of Sudan's ambassador to Nairobi. Following this allegation, the proposal by the US Congress suggests that Kenyan officials may have assisted blacklisted individuals, including the members of RSF, in stashing money within Kenyan financial systems. The Kenya's Haven Financial Safety for Individuals and entities on the Office of Foreign Assets Control will be another subject of investigation for specially designated nationals, blocked persons and other foreign terrorist organizations based in Somalia, Uganda and South Sudan. The motion will also seek to assess the relationships of the government of Kenya with non-state armed groups and violent extremist organizations, including the RSF and Al-Shabaab. Matiang'i is among individuals who have been sanctioned by the US Treasury for his engagement with activities against the requirements of non-NATO states. The hosting of Matiang'i by President William Ruto in Nairobi actually sparked concerns within Washington and among the UN diplomats, whereby, if this motion is passed in the US Congressional Senate, the amendments will require US Secretaries of the State, Defense and Treasury, as well as the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, to initiate a review of the status within 90 days, and submit findings to the US Congress within 180 days. Senator Risk has long expressed concerns over Kenya's growing diplomatic and trade alignment with China, warning that the US must re-evaluate its ties with nations showing allegiance to President Beijing. According to his submissions in the US Congress, Senator Risch submitted the full text of President Ruto's speech made at Peking University, delivered on April 23, as part of the congressional record. On the other hand, the deepening of Kenya's financial dependence on China, including the 880 billion Kenyan shillings in debt, and another 129.35 billion Kenyan shillings paid in the 2024-25 fiscal year, has also been flagged for investigations. The congressional proposal will also investigate Kenya's relationships with Russia and Iran, citing the growing tensions between the US and the two nations. Senator Risch warned that any strategic closeness between these nations could jeopardize US-Kenya cooperation. Thank you and keep on subscribing.